So you're here on my platform, and so
Yes.
and it's a small one, but it is mine. And a lot of what the black community wants from white people are the space on platforms to tell our stories, right? Because a lot of times, white America sees black people through a white lens, and so maybe you can. I know, like say here, I'm going to tell my story, but can you start, because this whole conversation started with what you were talking about Jonathan Scales and what he posted.
Yeah. So, this is the one we're name dropping. This is the first name drop, Jonathan Scales.
Hello, Jonathan Scales.
Okay, but we have
Are we doing
a
that?
former bandmate here, so
yeah,
it's
we
fine.
do exactly. Yeah, it's cool.
Good friend of mine.
Yeah, and the
Good
other
friend.
two members are friends of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
mine too.
And yeah, so there you go. So they're friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ian Maciak is also a friend.
Yeah.
So if
Yes.
he wants to get name dropped here, but I can't name drop the first one because
That's
Yeah.
who I thought we were
he's a little
talking about
bit-
was him.
Yeah. So I watched a video that John posted. He was on a roof. Did you see that one?
At his apartment, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how someone had posted this person he was like, this person's well-meaning, not trying to attack them, but they were posting rhetoric that was similar to all black people are X. They are this, they are that. And he was talking about the diversity. Like when we think about, he was saying we think about white people and we can divide up white people into all these different facets and different kinds. There's the hippies, there's the surfer dudes, the skater dudes, the geeks, the whatever. But we, as a culture, tend to just kind of boil down blackness, if you will, into just, it is this. So my question was, and that kind of was the foundation for the question, what do you want white people to know about black culture?
So this all started from a throwaway line, I think, that you made right before you left about how you grew up around white people.
Yep.
So if you want to start this off, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. How do I want people to see me? Is that
Or not just
another way?
the shades or the different facets of the black community.
Gotcha.
Communities.
Yeah, with the community and the place, in the area that I grew up around, it was predominantly white. I can't really remember the percentage, but I mean, it's an area where most people know each other, so it's not that big of a place, for one. And so for me, I was blessed with parents that raised me to love everybody, and some people were raised differently. I was raised in the church and just raised with that mentality to love everybody. And so I did. I didn't really see color as color, even though, looking back now, I can definitely see how my life has been outlined by the color of my skin in different ways. But because of where starting here, because of the way I was raised to be a black educated man, being the first person to graduate from college from my family, and just pushing educationally along and coupled with the thought process and being ingrained to love everybody. I don't feel like I talk or act or carry myself in a way that people expect a black person to be, because everything that you see on TV or in movies is not the way every black person is. At the same time, just because I am like the way I am doesn't mean that I'm not as woke as somebody, I'm not as woke as somebody else is. So it's one of those things where I've definitely experienced just being out and about, and because I was black and I used to have locks, especially, it's like one of the hardest times in my life, and one of the most, one of the best parts of my life too, because it helped me to grow and to understand who I am. You come across the judgment just because I look the way I am, I'm this way. So, even being, and I hope I'm not just going off on a tangent, but even, to the point of pumping gas. I remember pumping gas many times. Hey man, where's the weed at? Because I've got locks. It's one of those things where like Jonathan was saying in the video, he opens his mouth and he's very articulate and he talks completely different from, you know, what people think that you should be. It's the way I want to think, because I'm black and this is the way I should be. Am I kind of answering your question?
Yeah.
So really just growing up around that, I was kind of perceived one way. I guess it's the way I can sum it up, but I definitely was not that way at all. It was really kind of a blessing in disguise growing up where I grew up, because I had to be around people that weren't like me. But at the same time, there was that silent oppression of definitely being fearful if I'm driving and police pull me over because I know I'm going to get treated differently, or walking in the mall with friends of mine and being pulled aside and said that I'm stealing when we were just looking at things. That's stuff that I just had to go through. It's because I was the black person in the store at the time. So I feel like I'm going on a tangent.
You're not.
But yeah, man, growing up in that area, I experienced it all. Being raised to love everybody, I was open to hanging with everybody. I was open to dating whoever, but I definitely had those situations where I couldn't date certain people. I had, situations where I had one in particular, and I apologize to you if you ever happen to see this, where I had to break up with a girl because her stepdad called and threatened me that if I didn't break up with her, something was going to happen to me. So that's kind of stuff that, you have to grow up with, just because of the color of my skin. Those are the things that all that came flashing back, even more. And it has every time something happens, but for whatever reason, I don't know. For whatever reason this time, I feel like it's different. All of it has hurt. When you hear about anybody, any of your black brothers and sisters, and for me, anybody dying that shouldn't, they're just going about their business, and, people lose their lives all the time, of all races, and that honestly hurts me. That's just the way I was raised to be. But something about this time brought all that flooding back for me, and to understand that if I weren't black, how different would my life have been? Because I remember many times, and this is a very transparent moment for me, where I'm like, why does this have to keep happening to me? And then I can look back now and I'm like, it's because I was black. That's hard. Those are the things that need to change. I am married to a mixed, my wife is mixed, and so my daughter is mixed even more. I guess that's the best way to put it. My wife is mixed with two races, white, and her mom's from Thailand. And so my daughter is black, which is, when you're mixed, people will see you as black. So they're going to see her as black because I'm black. Now that I'm from Africa, everything's mixed in to make me who I am. But she's half black, and her mom is white and Thai. So where I am now, we're growing up in a different area where it is a little more mixed than where I grew up. So where I am now, we're at the point where we have to, like Jonathan said earlier, we have to sit and talk to my daughter about, hey, you need to be prepared for this, because if your dad gets pulled over, they're going to see somebody else in the back. And, my wife has said, and I guess I can't say this on her behalf, the worry of if my husband gets pulled over and sees a kid that doesn't look like him in the back, are the cops going to try to say, hey, that's not your kid? Like, these are different things we have to think about all the time. That's the hard stuff. And I guess I'll end it here. Just as a dad, all this hit me the hardest because I'm thinking about the next generation, not just my daughter, where, as Jonathan said, again, we really have to keep this in front of everybody and figure out a way to show, hey, this is the way things should be. They need to change, because for the next generation, for one, kids of that age, they honestly don't know racism is taught. So how do we fight for them, to not have to grow up in that? And that's really going to start with hard conversations and people just being willing to stand up and not just let it subside and just go away.
I grew up here, for better or for worse. There is a house that you passed on the way in, like right as you face the street on the way out, that when I was 12 years old and had a couple friends over from church, called the cops on us for just being kids and like running around and on my street.
Right.
You know, and that's one of a laundry list of things. But my awareness of blackness came when I started to see black people that dressed, looked like, and sounded like me and were interested in the same types of things that I was interested in. Whenever I grew up, the sense that there was something called black intellectualism wasn't anything that was on the map. Most of my friends were into sports and rap and all of those things, and to be honest, I was never interested. But my blackness got questioned for my lack of interest in activities,
right?
Not due to
Right.
like who I am or my equal likelihood of being in the exact same situations that those guys would be in, right? And so as I meet people, as I start to look at the blooming of social media and internet culture in general, and start to understand that like there's black nerd culture, like there's all these things that don't throw away your blackness because you're into anime, say, right? And if you notice that a lot of even like black musicians don't speak the way that this black stereotype is,
Right.
Because there is a sense of black intellectualism when it comes to high levels of musicality, right? You listen to Max and all these guys talk. They didn't talk, and even black people in general in the 60s and 70s don't speak like whatever the black stereotype is, right? And so a lot of my friends and the people that I've met as an adult speak more like the revolutionaries in the 60s and 70s than they do the stereotype of what a black person sounds like, right? And things like that, to me, and seeing it, were eye-opening, because I grew up in a weird situation. This is a white neighborhood, but now there are more colored people. By colored people, I mean people of color, black, Hispanic, and there have always been that here. I wasn't the only black person here, black child here as a kid. Like my best friend Chris lived right around the over there. Our friend Aitza, Puerto Rican family right next door, and so. And then, like, I've always had white friends, and I went to a 100% white, black church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So
100%.
It could be flipped in that way.
Completely. And so code switching was a huge deal, even though it didn't have that name then. Yeah. The idea that, like, in order to fit in and to be allowed to be black, I had to look and sound like them, and then to be allowed to be intelligent or to be one of the good ones, I had to speak in a different way around my white friends.
Agreed. Yeah, on the flip side of that, I just want to jump in for a second on that. One thing, and I'm glad it happened to me, there was a friend of mine, and I started going to church with her, and it was predominantly white. I could say that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was like a shell shock for me, because like what made me think of this is Jonathan said, going to a predominantly just all black church. That's what I grew up in. So for me, that's all I knew. And I guess thinking about it right now, it makes me think about how the world sees things. That's all we see. You're in a all black church. That's all you know. And then all of a sudden, I'm like the only black person in this church. And so for them, I remember it being kind of weird seeing, from my perspective, the way people looked at me and stuff like that. But the more that I went, people were more open to me. They got used to seeing me. And, I guess we could say, he's one of the good ones. But in a way, just to kind of bring this all the way back around, I feel like that was a good thing for that church in general, if that makes sense. Because I was all of a sudden, okay, maybe black people, they know black people are fine, but maybe I don't have to worry about every black person that I see that walks through our doors. That's not weird anymore, So for all I know, they have more of other races that come to their church, but I know for sure I felt welcome the more that I went years later when I hadn't gone in forever, and that welcome was still there. So it's dropping in, somebody that is totally different into a situation that allows for things to change because they had to get to know me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had a similar experience with visiting, or I played at a 100% black church, and I don't even know how I don't know why I played. I can't remember. Like, someone I knew was like, "Hey, this church needs a drummer," so I went and played. And what I noticed from that, and then also my experience growing up in a predominantly white church and seeing when black people would come and visit, was that there was, on some fundamental level, a desire to be welcoming to someone who is not like them.
Right.
And that was my experience going into this black church, was like, they were like, "Please come back. Like, thanks for being here." Like, it didn't feel like I was being eyed. Like,
right.
It felt like they're on a, even if it was awkward, and there is like an awkwardness to what we're describing, like it's not perfectly comfortable.
No.
But there is like a desire, I think, in a lot of people, even if they don't know how to integrate a different perspective.
Right.
I think that most modern Christians understand that at least the modern interpretation of Christianity is necessarily inclusive, right? To whatever level they're still contending with,
right?
Which is why you still have a fight for like homosexuals
right.
in the church, and having them have their own. So they have to have their own churches, and things are like even more segregated, right?
Right.
There are churches that still don't believe in women clergy.
Yep.
I mean, so for one way or another, like they have the modern church has to tackle with the inclusivity and everyone being equal, but at the same time dealing with a lot of the things that they haven't worked through as a human being.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that again, that goes in degrees. Where was I? So, blackness. I mean, same thing about no one's ever threatened me about dating somebody, but I've been told like you can't meet my father. Or or the whole "I don't date black guys" line, right? I've had several white girlfriends, and the majority of them, their families were utterly fantastic, and I probably because they were. I mean, I don't want to speak for them because I honestly love most of them, right? And I see a continued fight for equality in some of their children, so I know that a lot of that stuff came from a very real place.
Right.
Maybe I had something to do with that. Maybe that had nothing to do with me, and that was just built in when I got there.
Right.
Who knows? That's not important.
Yep.
What's important is that I was told by an old coworker, like when my girlfriend surprised me from being out of town for like a few weeks because she was tending to some family issue or whatever. When she came into the store and surprised me, and she saw that was my girlfriend, like the next week she told me that it might be better for me to stick to my own race.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard it on both sides too. Yeah.
I know plenty of black dudes and that don't date white women that think that you're not black unless you're with a sister.
Agreed.
And I'm like, man, I don't have a dog in that fight. I think that everybody should be first of all, if you have a relationship that is a stable, loving relationship, no matter what that looks like, I am in no way obligated or have any type of desire to break that up. That is a beautiful thing.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter where you find it.
And it's hard to come by.
Yeah, it's hard to come by. It's such a rare thing. Why in the world, in a world lacking of love, do you want to tell somebody that is already whose culture already starves them of it, that they can't find it there?
Right. Yep. Agreed.
So, and to me, it's a coincidence that I ended up marrying a black woman, right? Because there was nothing in me that said I'm looking for a white woman or a black woman or whatever. It was just I want somebody that is a good fit. I want somebody that has similar interests. Yeah. And just basically judging off the list of it, like that, having a black woman like that, like for me, might be rare in this area. Just based on what I'm interested in. I don't know. I can't see a list of all the black women. right?
Right.
That alone, that I said that, might just be a further programming of my own biases of my own community that I need to let go.
Yeah.
And these are things, every time that I explore a thought, I'm faced with those types of programming. As a black man, I have to say, look, like it is a stereotype that black people, black-owned businesses are businesses that you don't want to have anything to do with because they'll rip you off. They're terrible with money. And there is a part of my experience that agrees with that. But in order for my experience to agree with that, I have to forget about every time I was in business with a white business owner and got screwed over too.
Yep.
So there's one bias that my brain expects and takes note of. And then there are all these other biases that could be built up, but they go away because they don't fit my overall narrative of like the types of businesses that I need to be doing business with.
Yeah. This is like I would say that this is definitely a conversation that is just putting to the side for a minute anything systematic about racism.
Right.
And it's dealing with like people.
Sure.
Humanity, because it's everything that you guys are saying, there is similar things in the white culture, similar things that I've experienced. Like I grew up in a pretty heavily spiritual Christian culture. And to my 14, 15-year-old brain, like the goal of life was to marry someone and then to have kids and whatever after that. Who knows, who cares. But it was like to the point that I would never even consider the thought of marrying outside of my church even. And that, like, so I think that there is we have, as we grow up and we mature, we have to break out of the constraints that kind of come around us because we're human and because of sometimes bad actors and people that try to manipulate and control. And that could be more related to the systemic side of it. But I think we do, as people, we do lock ourselves in, and there is like a conscious effort that it takes to break out of those biases when they can be, they can be aimed in any direction.
Right. Right.
I think that's 100% true, but I don't separate, even though I should, probably the systematic from the personal, because behind every decision on a corporate level, there are people, right? And so these aren't machines that operate without our knowledge. They operate within someone's knowledge.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah.
And it just might be the case that there are societal pressures, which again are people, but society is a system, right? That's why I don't think about those two things separately.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that is what we were having was the same conversation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I get that.
So,
for sure.
Like, if it could be framed in front of a jury of your peers that, like, in the certain ways that sentencing has affected people of color, those human beings that you're looking at, like, have a choice to make, like, on whether or not they're going to, like, act without that knowledge or act despite that knowledge. Yeah. So, man, I had so many, being stopped at a country bar playing with a country band because they did not believe I was with the band.
Mm-hmm. I've been there. Playing with I was about to do another. I was about to do another drop.
I knew what you were about to say.
I was about to do another drop. I'm not doing another drop. But playing with a bluegrass band. Hey, what is he doing here?
Yeah.
Always getting those looks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to my guys if they see that.
Being like me and a friend of mine were sitting in a car talking just on the side of the road, actually in the neighborhood. So it was really not like we're like under a stoplight, like in the middle of something, not like in some dark corner or whatever, just somewhere that wasn't where I don't think we each had a suitable place to play or a suitable place to hang out, and it was late. And we literally we were just talking.
Yeah.
Woman gets pulled out of the car while an asshole cop talks to me, basically grilling the woman, the girl that I was with. I don't want to say her name, but asking her if I was holding her against her. She was white, holding her against her will.
Wow.
and stuff like that. Yeah, and I hear similar stories about like my white friends openly having sex in their cars, and the cops just being like, "You can't be here." Like no second cop is called. Like nobody's pulled out of their cars or anything like that. Like I've been told that like that's happened to people before, but I guarantee you that it was because I look like this, and not just like this, right? Because a black man of your stature doesn't make the same impression as a 6'3", 260-pound dude.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's almost in that spirit. Even though I'm a huge fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that I wear my "Don't Panic" shirt so much.
It's a practical choice,
Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, look, I'm not here for you. Like, I'm just in the grocery store trying to get milk,
Right.
and eggs. Like, I'm sorry, I may not have an active smile on my face because like my head is somewhere else, right? But like, look, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to live my life.
Right. Or having to flash a smile just to let somebody know you're okay.
Yeah, or wave or do all those little things. Those are the types of things like background processes to show other people that we're non-threatening are things that we grow up with.
Yep. Or we're taught to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there's nothing like that in the white culture that I grew up in. You know, I mean, I think from the closest thing, which is not close at all, is like being taught to be polite. But that doesn't even touch the reasons for why that would be an experience. It's all really eye-opening, and I think for the people that are kind of maybe stuck in their ways a little bit and kind of resisting, you know, the onslaught of like, we need this in our culture, we need this change in our culture. I do think that it just is going to take a big amount of humility in the white culture to listen.
It's not just white people, man. As I said earlier, like, think about what I just said to you and think about women.
Yeah, for sure.
And think about like how they have to smile and engage, because if they risk offending a stranger, that may be inviting violence onto them.
My wife had that happen the other day, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, that is the same struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that's the way we need to see it, though. Not everybody sees it that way.
Right. But here's the thing: you have a power dynamic that says otherwise. You have a man that, in most cases, can easily overpower a female versus a state or a police officer or several armed police officers that can overpower an unarmed black man. Right? So the power dynamics correlate with, like, you have the person that's doing the thing that has the power, and you have the appeasement aspect to avoid being have violence be perpetrated against you.
Right.
So to me, unless there's something that I'm missing, those things are the same.
They are very much the same.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah. The thing that I was thinking about as you were saying that, and as you were saying too, it is something we all are going to have to work on, because it's not just it's really just perspective because of the way that things have gone. And two, it's on the wide angle, in my opinion, it's those people, because there's plenty of people that you come across that are like yourself, that you know want to see the best things happen to everybody and to see equality, but they're just lazy, or they're just sitting there like, hey, I'm good right now, or
they don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't know what to do, or I've got this going on in my life, and so they're just kind of focused on this, and they're forgetting like a bigger picture thing that's bigger than all of us, to be honest with you. So it's trying to figure out how to say, hey, you do have a voice, and your voice matters too. And on the flip side, my question is, as things start to change, because I'm just a hopeful person and just believe in the positive, I've always been this way, how are we going to react on the opposite end? Because we have earned the right to feel the way that we feel, but I guess I want to say a worry right now as is if we do see change, will it be received?
So I have a friend of mine that. Oh, no, I'm going to say this because this literally could be anybody because everybody has issues in their marriage.
Yeah.
So, so a friend of mine is having issues in their marriage, and one interesting point that was made was after it all, even if the significant other does everything that the person that was wronged requested due to reconciliation, that doesn't mean that your heart is automatically going to be open to like building a future, because like the past and all this, especially like multiple offenses, are really, really hard to forget. Yeah. And so a decision has to be made whether or not like that is enough, that show of reconciliation, whether heartfelt, and hopefully in this case it is enough for that person to move forward, or if that person just needs to get out.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But just to go back to the positive thing, I do, as hard as the conversations are and everything, it has, in a weird way to say these words, it has been great to see just how many people of different races have come together, whether it is because I feel like I need my face to be seen out here so people know I'm not racist, or, you know, to the most genuine person. Just the fact that there's different races and different countries that are coming together. I mean, in my opinion, this has been needed. It shouldn't have taken this long, but we never know in the ways that we need to change what's actually going to get our attention either. So, you know, as you've been saying, if we can just keep this in front of everybody and just really in front of your eyes, like, don't forget the way you felt right now, you know, not to feel bad, but the way that you felt with what made me want to push to feel like I need to change. Keep that in front of your face. You know, that's for everybody.
There's a pretty powerful idea that the Bible presents. I'm not going to start preaching, just so we're here, just so we are clear. But there's a powerful idea that the Bible talks about, where it talks about. I think Jesus is telling people, don't just go out into the square to pray aloud so that people see you. Like, it's going to take you doing it by yourself in your room. And I think that idea applies here. Just in the like, you know, our culture is it's all about the visual, social media, what people are saying to their followers. I think that a lot of the change is going to come in the solitude of people just working this stuff out, like behind the scenes.
Right.
And then there obviously has to be a show of the change being made on a big scale. But it's kind of like us as musicians. We don't just turn our camera on and play without having practiced or learned the instrument. Like, we have to go into our practice rooms and spend countless hours working out the technique before we're able to present something that is, you know, an expression of ourselves as an artist, as a musician.
Right.
I think that applies here. It's you know, everybody is making a display right now of solidarity, and that's needed. And, you know, I think that it's going to be, I would say that, like, just not speaking from an understanding of the black experience, but speaking as someone who is, I feel like I'm in the early stages of addressing these things in my own life. And I'm realizing that just the time it's going to take, you know. I think maybe that could be at least maybe an encouragement to someone else who might be listening, who is just kind of stumped, like another white person or another of whatever. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what culture you're from. It's, if you're stumped as to what to do, is like, I think that there's it's going to take time, honestly, and I think it'll be something that you have to do. You have to work out by yourself. don't know if that makes sense. That was just a thought I had.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna like the change. Like there are people that have been fighting for change for decades and decades, and there are people just now waking up to the fight that's been had for longer than decades. Hundreds of years. So it's maybe that can be. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? What's y'all's thoughts?
So the first thing that I just want to make clear what you just said. Like, basically, for white people to be a part of the conversation, they have to go to the beginner's phase and learn the basics. If they're trying to become sort of like outspoken warriors for the cause, they're speaking out of turn. That's basically what I heard.
I think that's
because to me, it's different to express yourself and where you are and to be open about your own journey than to make prescriptions about like where we should be going. Mm-hmm. Those two things operate on different levels. One of those is fine, right? Like telling people what they should do should happen after the incubation period, after the study, after doing the hard work, doing the introspection, all of that stuff, right? And even in this case, like, because it's like it's not that we don't need white leaders, but the white leaders need to take their cues from the people that have had their foot in the movement this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
that's how I feel. Pretty hardcore. And I see a lot of people posting, and again, it's all well intentioned. It's like people that are wanting to make a display of solidarity. But I think that a lot of the displays that are being made, like I can't tell looking at my feed who has been in this fight for decades and who is just now jumping in. And it muddies the waters. It's kind of like the issue of the black square and how that was like cool to do, but then it was also people started like educating others that like, oh, okay, if you use the black square and this hashtag, you are actually clouding. People aren't able to see the information that they need to see.
That was specifically when people were using the Black Lives Matter hashtag with the square.
Yeah.
So the show must be paused. Blackout Tuesday was the official hashtag for that, and a lot of people got that confused, and that was a mess. But at the same time, like I saw with that in particular, that there are a lot of people that thought that was meant to shut people up. But the whole pause thing was supposed to be specifically for the awareness of what you need to know or where you can donate your money, all of these things, right? And so it wasn't for everybody just to do a black square and be gone, right? Which is why a lot of people ended up posting facts about history, donation links, and all that stuff.
So as you're scrolling through, you're seeing black, but you'll see a post of this is where you can donate.
Okay.
And so it's not all clogged.
Yeah,
I mean, I was guilty of that. I jumped on the train and did the black square without knowing.
Sure, I did the black square too, but I actually posted more that day than I have in a long time.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was not about black silence.
Right.
Like, so it was about re-platforming black people, or just boosting our signal. And so every black person had in my head an obligation to post that day, even if it is their drum clips, because that's a part of black history. Whatever a black person has going on is a part of black history. Yeah. So, that whole thing it seemed last minute and not organized at all.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think that's why there was confusion on it. One thing you said, and an analogy that came to mind about you not being able to tell the difference of who's been in it forever and who's just getting started is the beginning of the year when everybody decides they're going to get fit. My thought process is like, let's not make this be or allow this to be, all right, I'm going to go to the gym and it lasts for 2 weeks. Like, it's going to have to be something like not just saying that everybody needs to work out by any means, but it's going to have to be like, on you, because I can use this example because for me, I kickstarted that for myself. For me, I had to tell myself, okay, I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to do this for 100 days. and then after that 100 days, I'm going to do this. It's going to have to be the same thing, not just for, those who aren't black, but for blacks too. Like, this is what we are fighting for. Everybody needs to make sure that they are educated as, blacks as well, and take time every day. This is what I need to do. This is how I can push this movement. This is how I can prepare myself even to work with somebody who is not of my race, and to bring things into better than where they are right now. It's going to take an everyday focus, to be honest with you. Which is,
we very briefly touched on marriage, but marriage is like a hyper-focused version of culture, I think. Like, you're so close to this other person that has had a completely different life experience than you, even if you're part of the same culture, even if you're the same skin color, and you got to learn how to, like, live with them, and you have to learn how to see things from their perspective.
Especially in quarantine.
And especially in quarantine, when you're spending extra amounts of time with them. And, it's even that alone, I haven't been married very long, but that has been a eye-opening experience. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's about trying to take yourself out of your skewed perspective and try to see it from somebody else's point of view.
No, that's it. So I want to go back to drum stuff real fast, because we talked about, so we opened on these types of dialogues and just being open, and I understand that is a certain subset of people that don't want to have conversations in real life, mainly because they are afraid they'll say the wrong things, or they don't want to be like trapped or stumped, and the appearance of that is off-putting to them. My opinion is the only way to grow is to be in that situation. Back to the being right at the edge of your ability and pushing the edges. Right. Like, you have to be confronted with those uncomfortable notions, those uncomfortable ideas, in order to actually, and you have to not be afraid of saying the wrong thing, because if you go ahead and say it, then you can be corrected, and then things will be better. Right? So it doesn't matter if the CEO of DW is completely oblivious to Black history. As soon as he sits down with people on camera and they start talking to him about Black history, he's no longer oblivious to Black history.
Yep.
Right? And it sucks that, we live in a society where so many people can be oblivious to Black history, but that can't be worse than the education of Black history. Right? So that's what I think. That's the biggest thing. Like, I'm a talker. I like doing this, even though the interview format really isn't my thing. But my push for you and my challenge for you is to talk to, because I can't do this. You have to talk to other drum makers on your level. You don't have to reach out to DW and all these people. Just talk to your circle of people that are doing what you're doing, and have the conversation about how you and your unique position as being like boutique drum companies can perpetuate what we're starting here. Yeah,
that's good.
And honestly, in my perspective, I can't really speak for you, but we kind of had this conversation last week. You know what to say because you're already kind of living it. You're just having to learn how to go about things, and you're learning what, how you really want to affect and be a piece of equality and everything. But just sharing your heart and honestly being willing to do that, it's going to go a long way, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. I hope that, I think for me, my biggest hope would be that I would, because I like you're saying, like, I think a lot of people don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to offend people. They don't want to, like, get on people's bad side. And I think it's going to take, just like you're saying, like, the willingness just to start talking. And then when you say things that are wrong, not if, but when you say things that are wrong, the willingness to just kind of back up, reevaluate, change. I think the trap of our culture is right now, people are more afraid of that, I think, because they feel like that one thing that they say that could be wrong could be the end for them. And you know what I mean?
They shouldn't. They have the ultimate, what's the word? The ultimate role model in Washington. That is he is inoculated against truth in a way that I have never seen a person be inoculated. And has made such an art form on doubling down or denying his wrongs or being wrong, and not even just like on a societal level, just in statements. We can just go to the lightest thing, just in things that he's like saying. Like, there is no such thing as a correction of Donald Trump. It is Donald Trump says something, the media gets him, and then he says that he's always says what the media says, or he says something, the media like confronts him, and the media is fake news. Those are the only two situations that we've had with that. And as a person in the highest office of the planet, that on the planet, if you think that the United States is the greatest or at least the most influential country in the world, that sends a signal down to people that tell them that they don't have to be accountable for their statements or their beliefs.
Yeah, I think it can appeal to the dark side of humanity, which is like, you know, screw you, I'm not changing. Like, I am who I am kind of thing. And I think
Telling it like it is.
Yeah, telling it like it is. Telling it like it is. Like, and I think that people would be surprised to know just how far humility can get you in with people that maybe disagree with you on things.
It's not just, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
It's not just that humility can get you far, because I'm sure it can, but there's no tangible social capital to humility.
Yeah,
when you see humility, or at least admitting that you're wrong, as a sign of weakness.
And when I say get you far, I think what I mean is get you farther towards your goal. And obviously you have to like, obviously this is kind of limited because your goal has to be connection.
Right, and not power.
And not power, yeah. So that's a little bit of a difference. You have to make that distinction. But I think that for people that are genuine, like genuinely want to help or genuinely want to change or address these things, I mean, speaking for myself, I think humility is a good first step, because there's also a lot of vulnerability that it takes, because I think to be willing to speak, and the vulnerability that opens you up to people saying, well, you're this way, or like you said this, it must mean you think this, or and it opens you up to attack. And so I think that's why a lot of people will just post the black square and say nothing else. You know what I mean? They'll repost what someone else said. And I do think also there's an element of like white people need to listen a lot more. You know, like I think that speaking on behalf of the black experience for a white person is just no man's land, you know. Right. But yeah, so I think
it's not just speaking on the black person's experience. It's making value assessments on black work.
Right.
Because saying something like, well, they need to be saying that a situation like, so victim blaming, I think that goes in this criteria, because what you do is you have an assumption of rightness with the police force. So George Floyd obviously did something wrong, whether he was a criminal or has had a criminal background or not. And so the wrongness of what he may have done ends up justifying the position that he's in, even in extreme cases, his death. That is sort of the most insidious form of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? So they look at it and they say, it doesn't matter, like, he was breaking the law. And so they're making a value assessment of like that situation based on, like, as an outsider.
Yeah.
That's a little different than like judging black experience. But it's a way that black people have been gaslit, like, over the whole history of this movement, saying it's not as bad as like you're making it out to be, and all of these other types of things. You're making value assessments on our struggle and the way that we live our lives.
And I think people in general will love to focus on the wrongs another person has committed or is committing to avoid addressing themselves. You know what I mean? I think speaking from someone who grew up in white culture, and I've heard all the, black people are this way. They just do this, and then that's why. And, I think that it's a diversion, because a lot of those same people like are really mean,
Right.
And their marriages are maybe like really, really bad, and there might be abuse going on in the marriage. There may be like hardcore judgmentalism, and there's just a lack of love and compassion in their own lives. And they're saying something they have it's based out of just total ignorance and bigotry and racism. It's like it's the diversion to detract from the problems, because no one likes to address their own problems. You know what I mean? That the white community doesn't want to address these problems. So it's like it's easier on a surface level to deflect. And I think that's maybe partially why things have been so difficult. It's like it's a human nature thing to just divert blame.
There are certain things that I didn't hear from white people, or the things that white people said, until I was much older. Like a saying, like people say, "That's mighty white of you." Like to say that was mighty nice of you. Like that is a saying. There are some people that, like, growing up, heard things like somebody makes a delicious spread or something Sunday, and it's like, wow, no niggers are eating like this right now. It's like stuff like that. I mean, seriously, like that's what people say, and they weren't things until I actually had conversations with white friends about race. Those are the types of things that, like, they would tell me that they grew up with. So if there are more and more people that grew up with those sayings, there's no surprise in my head that, like, they have to work through some shit. I couldn't imagine. Like, I mean, I can tell you that there are plenty of black people that have really mean things to say about white people. Mm-hmm. But that was never my household. Mm-hmm. That was my grandma sometimes, but she grew up in the 20s. That was a whole different thing. And she was a single mother of 5, a black single mother of 5. That's a whole other thing. Like, so no, I don't fault her for, like, carrying through the experiences that she had to get through to survive and carrying that resentment. But my mom and my dad never spoke ill of white people in general. Same. Never.
And that's the hope, is that as, like, generationally, we are not far removed from the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. If we look in the course of human history, like,
no, my mom and my dad were in it.
Exactly.
My mom and my dad. My dad just turned 70 this year. My dad was born in 1950. My dad was born in 1951. They were teenagers,
and they were they probably were very aware of what was going on.
Mom and dad were 18 and 19, or 17 and 18 respectively, when Martin Luther King got shot.
That's if you
older
put it
than
in
perspective, when 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
and I still remember that day clearly.
To put it in perspective, the hope is that, and that doesn't mean that we're, like, going to abdicate responsibility for actually making the change that needs to be made, but the hope in it is that as the generations pass, there's like a Native American saying that has something to do, I might be butchering this, so I apologize if I am, but it talks about, like, planting the sequoia, that you'll never live to see it grow tall enough to provide shade to the future generations. And it's like that kind of mindset. Some of that is the case here, where we're trying to build a world that we may actually never see, but hopefully the generations to come will actually be able to live in the shade of the work that was done. So.
The way I feel about that, though, is there's still there's many people who are still afraid to speak up because maybe their grandparents or their parents are still alive and they still think that way. But how do we get them to speak up, like the young lady we were talking about whose video was posted, or she posted, where she's having this hard conversation? That's where stuff's going to really start to change.
Probably the people, possibly, just throwing this out there, the people in the civil rights movement, like they were planting the sequoias that would allow for that experience to happen in 2020, where like a kid, and that's a continual process. I don't mean to like say that like, I don't know, to say that it's not going to be for a much longer time, but like I think that's a human thing, is that the older generations lay the groundwork for what's going to come in the world that we hopefully can live in, where this kind of stuff doesn't happen, Which
is why it's so important to know history, as to bring that back around, like understanding history and where we have come, and not just Black history and the Black movement, women's suffrage, gay rights, all of that stuff is extremely important to understand, in order to really understand the sentiment that you're trying to put forth.
Totally, yeah. And I mean that's like an idea that I try to live by, but it's like I'm trying to make that my learned experience, that you can lay the groundwork for, because I mean my wife and I will have kids someday, and it's like, I think about how am I going to have the conversation with my kids? Like it's different from you, because like yours is literally a life and death thing, but for me it's like I want to raise a kid that isn't gonna be opposed to like a different perspective or a different experience. So
once you abolish slavery, but you don't open up society to accommodate newly freed citizens, when they can't get bank loans, when they can't own property, when they can't vote, you have a bottleneck so that you don't accrue generational wealth. And so when you were talking about the sequoia and future generations and the shade, that is something that has been denied Black people for such a long period of history. And so if you want to see why poverty is still rampant in those types of communities, it traces back to that. It's been so hard without a booster. So this is why reparations keeps coming back up, because it's not just that we're free, because free without a structure, a social structure, means nothing. We just become indebted back into the system, or thrown in prison and then working for the prison industrial complex, which built on a model of slavery. Reparations keeps coming back up because you had basically a whole bunch of people that said, hey, now you're on your own, when the playing field, even after slavery was over, it was not level, right? And some people think about that in terms of the drum community too, about how, like, especially with poor Black gospel drummers, how it's still not level.
Yes.
And that's why I suggested when we were talking about charity earlier, like that's maybe a direction to go into, because going in there and supporting our children in that way and having nice things and which sound good, and that when you listen to it, that's something that you want to play, can ignite that type of interest in a way that if the school just can't afford it, they'll never get a chance to experience. Right.
Yeah. That makes that's making my wheels turn, just about trying to think back into my own experience of the light bulb moments for myself, and to realize, like, if that was never presented to me, like, what would I be doing? Would I be working in a machine shop? Would I be a plumber? Who knows? Not that those are, whatever. Those are great jobs. It's yeah. I mean, I think for me, that's where my attention keeps coming back to, is like my community. And then as things grow and as things develop, as your means get in a better place, you can actually expand that sphere, so to speak.
Yeah, and also looking at your community as everybody. Yeah. Like that's the mindset that the world eventually, hopefully, will take, and see. I don't know that we'll see it, but that my community is your community and vice versa.
Yeah, and community for me, like everyone who lives in my city, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
the residents of my city, and then expanding it out from there. Yeah, I feel like it's an uncomfortable time for everyone, for different reasons, but it's good that we're having these conversations because I think it gets things started in a way, like starts the wheels turning.
Yeah, it was something that was said earlier. We said people were scared to speak up, and my thought was, I'm glad to see people speaking up and saying the wrong thing. Honestly, I'd rather them say the wrong thing, like you said, because when you speak up, you at least can be corrected. You know, as long as you're open to the correction. If you really want to change, you will be. It's not going to feel good, but as long as you're open for the correction, then that's where things will really change. But if you're scared to say anything at all, then you're never going to learn anything at all. I mean, it's just like with anything. If you never sit down and try to play a beat, how are you ever going to learn it? You know what I'm saying? It's going to take time. You know, somebody will hear it, or, you know, you'll ask somebody about it. That's how you finally learn. But if you never take time to try to speak, it's never gonna change. And then a lot of people, they get they get brought down or start getting afraid to speak up, you know, in those ways. To them, I would say, I mean, if you don't jump, if you never jumped in the pool, you were never going to learn how to swim. It's one of those things. Yeah.
So, yeah, I just want to reiterate, just to maybe put on a bow on things, like, because you asked me, and again, I've been trying to watch everything, which is a little weird to like be a part of a conversation, but still be like, is this camera on? Is that camera on? Did that die? All that stuff.
That one's been blinking at me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That red light is amazing.
Yeah.
But so you asked like what white people should be doing, or what do we want to see? So I'm going to say what I want to see, and Chazare is going to say what he wants to see because we don't speak for each other. So, like I said, do some study, read Black thinkers, watch everything that you can. It's not that hard to find. Like, all you have to do is like start with a Google search, essential Black history, right? Like, you don't have to reach out to a Black person to do a Google search, right? If there are some vagaries in there about specifics, sure, fine. But the internet is vast enough that it should be easy enough to find a starting point, right? Influential Black thinkers, that's another Google search, right? And so everybody's going to be a little bit different, as you said before, about like how Black community is not a monolith, right? And so there's going to be differences in thought, and those differences in thought could be a conversation. You come to me and say, hey, I read X person and I read X person and they differ on this specific. What do you think? That's a fucking conversation. Yeah. Right? Remember their names, right? As I said, I'm bad at this too, and there are points that hit me more, and so I end up remembering those names more. But do them a service of remembering their names and why and under what circumstances, and the ones that have not been brought to justice, right? That is a great way to start. Yeah. Also, from the drum builder in you, reach out to your peers in that aspect and carry this conversation forward into a new circle and get their thoughts and share what you've learned here and broaden that, because I mean, as a drum builder, as a business owner, you operate differently than the people that play your instruments, right?
For sure, yeah.
And in some ways you have a larger reach than some of us can. So that's on you to go through and to spread this into your circle. Yeah,
that's one thing about that. I would also, maybe we could continue this conversation at a different time. It probably became clear with what I said earlier that like I have an interest in reaching the people that don't agree with what we're doing, or like don't agree with what's being said, or the people I went to high school with that that are, you could call them whatever you want to call them, but for me, I have a interest in reaching them. I also know that like my platform, like what people want to see, and there's that like pull of like, which is it grates against or rubs against my sensibilities as an artist, because it's like as an artist you be yourself in it, but as a business owner it's entirely, this is probably a different conversation, but I don't know what the step forward is for companies other if they want to do something real. I mean, like if I don't care, I mean, that's maybe a harsh thing to say, but if I could just post a statement and be done with it, you know what I mean? Like that's the safe thing to do, you know what I mean? But what does it mean to be a part of the change? And those are things I'm still thinking through, you know.
To kind of piggyback off both of you guys and I guess wrap this up, along with educating yourself, as Jonathan was saying, the more that you do that, the more that and that coupled with your heart to want to see change and just with the person that you are, that put together is going to be all that you need. From there, it's more of you finding within yourself to say, I don't want to see this continue on, so this has to change. I can't get tired. If I see something that's out of line, I need to speak up on that. You will be able to speak up on it because you're educated and you have the right heart for it. You see what I'm saying? So,
so less concern, I guess, for like pleasing people and more just like trusting that if your heart is in the right place and you do the work,
right,
the proper results are going to happen, or like the results that are, and you're going to piss people off and you're going to say things that are wrong and you're going to lose an audience. I don't care about like losing part of my audience. I'm not actually, I mean, I make stuff and sell it to make my living, but I don't care too much about that. Like I'm not trying to be a huge company and rake in the millions. Like, I really want to make products that are inspiring, and I want to be inspired as a musician myself, and there's like that side of it, but I hear you. It's like
and knowing too that it's not going to be easy. Like there's going to be people that are just like, I don't want to change, I'm comfortable. It's not that they're bad people. Some people are just comfortable. It's not affecting me. That's what goes back to the conversation and what I said earlier. It's funny how people change once somebody in their family's black all of a sudden. That's when a lot of people see that change, because okay, I love you. You're in my life. It affects me now. Now I need to change. But just know that with the work that you're doing, just imagine the hard work that we've, and our ancestors and everybody's been hoping and praying for and walking through and doing over this time. It's not going to be easy, but just the more that you're educated, the more that you'll be ready. And also you're always willing to ask questions, which is one of the best things that anybody can do about anything. If you don't ask questions, you'll never know how to proceed forward.
That's good.
So to wrap this up, I wanted to share something that my mom said to me on the phone, that she was looking through all this stuff. And again, she's 69 years old. She says to me that I never thought that we would be here again. I wasn't alive back then, but she was. So for her to say that and being through what she's been through hit me really, really fucking hard. So I want to thank you, Tim, for being here.
Yes.
This will go up as soon as I can get it up. I have to make some edits and stuff. But the fact that you would sit here and I wasn't concerned about putting you in the hot seat or not. I just wanted to talk. And I know some of the things like weren't the easiest to answer. Yeah. But like I appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Yeah, and anyone who wants to like reach out and have this conversation with me, Instagram's gonna be the best way. But I'm open to this continuing. I want it to continue. I don't want this just to be a one and done conversation.
Agreed.
Like the whole point of this conversation is to continue it,
Agreed.
Right.
So I think anybody who listens to this that wants to have a conversation with me, I'm open to it. So